Let's dive deeper into the inner workings of the Bake tool by creating a fake room from scratch. Start by importing the Bake prefab into your scene. By default, our prefab is configured for a 5x5 room, but this might not be the case on your site. In this example, we are actually using a 10x10 room. Let's make sure that the Baker prefab is centered in relation to your room. We recommend creating a round-the-world origin to make things simpler when it comes to calculating position offsets. Using common sizes like 5 or 10 also simplifies things since the scale inside the room can be whatever you want. I'll adjust its Y position to 5, and the prefab is now centered. The next thing we need to do is adjust the cameras. The front-facing camera needs to be positioned in the middle of the front wall. Since the room is 10x10, we just need to offset it by 5 from the center. We'll do the same for the back camera in the negative direction and center it on the back wall. The cameras are now on the correct position. Another thing we need to do is adjust the size of the orthographic cameras. This needs to be half the height of the room size, so we'll set it to 5. And we'll do the same for the back camera. In order to capture the full room, we also need to adjust the far clip to match the room size, in our case 10. Same for the front camera. Now that our cameras are set up for our room size, we can break down the Bake component parameters. The first thing we need to do is create the Bake asset. This stores all your Bake properties. You can reuse it in other Bakes. Create the asset anywhere you want. Next, name your fake room Bake. This will be used for the texture name. You can change the output folder, but we'll just use the default here. Select your room size, tall, wide, or square. In our case, we'll go with square. If you don't set this correctly, the Bake will look wrong. Set the resolution of the furniture layer. Try to use the smallest value possible because you can get away with a lot from a certain distance. You also have super sampling and anisotropic filtering for the Bake process. Try to use the smallest value possible for the room cube map texture. And finally, for the depth texture, we recommend you go with texture 2D for optimal performance, but you can use full-blown EXRs. The material helper allows you to auto-create a new material on the first bake and auto-assign the bake textures to it every time you bake. It's a great way to preview things, but it's completely optional. You can also add your own material and shader here. The most important part of the process is setting your furniture and room assets correctly. I'll add our room parent game objects. This is your walls, carpets, doors, or anything you can include. I'll toggle it off and on so we can see the room objects better. I'll also add our furniture layer for all our 3D models and toggle it off and on to get a better sense of what's being included. And we're done. I'll select my Bake prefab and bake the room. After a few seconds, our room is ready to use. And we can confirm that the fake room material has been automatically created for us. All we need to do now is apply it to a flat surface. I added a regular quad mesh beforehand. I'll just bring it up. All I need to do is get our material and apply it to the quad. Awesome! We can see that the room has been baked correctly. Let's dig into the actual fake interior shader and see what we can tweak. The most important property is the parallax step count, as this directly affects performance and visual fidelity of the effect. I'll turn off the noise effect so we can see it better. Now, if I set the parallax steps to something like 10, you can start to see that the effect breaks down. You can think of it as multiple layers of your furniture being stacked on top of each other based on the depth position we captured. The higher the step count, the better it will look and the more costly it is on the GPU. And remember, you can always use LUTs with different materials, using other step counts depending on the distance. 80 is great for up-close views, but overkill for a cityscape where you can use much lower counts. You can also tweak the furniture depth value if needed. Refined steps helps with better silhouettes, but you should also keep it as low as possible, preferably between a 0 to 8 range. The room size can actually be set automatically if your material is set in the Bake tool. If not, you will have to set this manually, 1x1 for square rooms, 2x1 for wide rooms, and 1x2 for tall rooms. Z and W are not used. In fact, depth is always 1, but we'll cover this near the end of the video and show you a trick to get deeper rooms. Next up is the noise control, which helps mask the layering effect. Instead of regular dithering, we use a blue noise texture to randomize where each ray starts and how each step is offset. Set the scale to the same size as your noise textures. Adjust the strength and phase of the noise to see what works best for your assets, and toggle between screen locked or surface locked noise by setting it to 0 or 1 respectively. For best results, we recommend using temporal anti-aliasing if possible, as it helps smooth out the jags and blend the noise effect. It's not a requirement, but it helps. We have a couple of room control properties that we can use to tweak the final results and add more variation across your scene. You can adjust the exposure of your cube map EXR. You could also rotate the cube map in 90-degree increments for additional variation. It's not too apparent in this bake, but if you had doors, you could change their placement. You can also adjust the prop brightness of your furniture layer. You can also tint each room, which is a great way to add variation to your scenes. You could create a custom shader that allows you to randomize the tint color based on world position, or use a simple script to change it. And you can of course also tile the room itself. And you also have an overlay layer that you can use for blinds, curtains, or anything else you may need. And of course, you can also tint it. And here is where we set our textures when you create things manually. Your cube map, furniture, and depth texture go here. The noise texture is included by default. There's a couple of things you need to keep in mind when baking rooms, and one of the most critical one is overlapping objects. By overlapping, I mean front to back and back to front. From the front view, we can clearly view where they overlap. Ideally, you'll want to avoid this, as it creates noticeable artifacts in the form of extrusions. If we go ahead and bake our room like this, we can immediately spot the problem. This is because of how the technique works and cannot be avoided without adjusting our object position. We have depth data from the back and front, but we have no data of anything in between, so the shader simply extrudes the furniture layer, causing these stick blocks. Knowing why this happens, we can actually trick the shader into working with overlapping objects under specific situations. The data won't be perfect, but the artifacts can be greatly reduced. For example, if I take my blue cube and make it just a bit smaller, I can hide the artifacts by placing them closer. This way, the front depth bake can capture my blue cube and the green cube just enough to create a believable surface. Ignore the shadows for now. It's not perfect, but at a distance it's probably going to work quite well. Let me open another scene. We've actually used overlapping objects in our examples. The ottoman is placed in front of the couch, but the artifacts are almost invisible, especially when viewed from a distance. You might have noticed that some of our objects are slightly rotated. This is more apparent from a top view and is completely intentional. We're doing this as to not overlap the table and chair legs, because we'd see the same extrusion artifact as before, as I'll demonstrate now. If I bake this as is, the extrusion issue will be clearly visible. Not the best of results. I could probably use a different type of desk and chair, perhaps something more blocky, but rotating your objects slightly can help a lot. Just enough to not overlap, and you should be good to go for most scenes. Experiment and see what works best for your assets. Our real fake interior shader depth is always 1, but that does not mean you can't have deeper room bakes. I'll double the size of this 3D room and show you a cool trick on how to expand your rooms. Let's fast forward this part. Since our room is bigger, we'll have to recenter our bake prefab. I'll just move it by -2.5 from world origin, and it's centered. Now I'll need to adjust the front camera in relation to the front wall, making sure it's centered. And do the same for the back camera with the back wall. So we now have our back camera aligned with the back wall and front camera aligned with the front wall. There's only one more thing we need to do before baking. We'll need to adjust the far clip value to match the room depth. In this case we're going from 5 to 10. And I'll do the same for the back camera. And we're finally ready to bake. The material helper is great for these types of fake rooms. The bake tool will automatically calculate your final room size material properties based on your camera settings and the selected room size. You can do all this manually, but if you set your material here, the bake tool will update everything for you. And just like that, we now have a deeper room while still having an internal depth of 1 in the shader. If you go to our material, we can see what's happening. The bake tool material helper has automatically set our room size to 0.5 by 0.5. Depth is still 1, but since the room is technically smaller in width and height, we get deeper rooms. It's a cool trick, and a material helper eliminates having to calculate sizes manually. We hope you enjoyed this in-depth overview of our real fake interiors bake tool and shader. Stay tuned for future tutorials as we explore more advanced applications with Amplify Shader Editor. Thanks for watching.